You're listening to The Quad, a Killjoys podcast. My name is Chris.
And my name is Stephanie. We are talking about the 6th episode of Season 2 of Killjoys, I Love Lucy. While we will talk about anything and everything from the episode, there will not be spoilers for future episodes.
So let's get started with our quick reviews. I enjoyed this episode. I'm going to qualify it for the most part. There's like a thing. But anyway, we'll get to it. But yeah, there were so many genre tropes combined in what I thought was an entertaining way. I was just enjoying it. It was fun. It was vaguely reminiscent of fan fiction. I don't think I've actually read any Killjoys fan fiction, but this is what I would imagine it to be.
Yeah.
You know, Lucy has taken form and is making out with Johnny. I just imagine that's like 90% of Killjoys fan fiction. Mm-hmm. Though I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong, but that's what I like to think of it as.
As well as Dutch having to sing because Hannah John Common has a good voice.
Yes, true. It did feel largely like fan wish fulfillment.
It did.
For a good chunk of the episode. But, speaking of the genre tropes, I am so grumpy about Sabine.
Yeah.
I want them to fix this next episode. I certainly hope they do, but at the same time, I know better than to get my hopes up because TV has just been disappointing me this year. Not this show so much, but that's beside the point. But anyway, we got good backstory for both Dutch and the plasma / green goo. They keep calling it plasma. I don't want to call it anything other than green goo, though.
I know. I like green goo, too, so we're going to keep calling it green goo.
What'd you think?
Overall, I think I enjoyed this episode. There were pieces of it that I enjoyed a whole lot, specifically all the stuff with Davin and Johnny, and then later Lucy working together. That really encapsulates what draws me to the show, is that just sense of fun. And, you know, I thought the opening scene with the two of them working together was great. Like, there was a lot of fun with Davin and Johnny in this episode.
Fun and teamwork, which is always what this show does really well.
Exactly. Fun and teamwork. Exactly. The scenes, the storyline with Dutch and Romwell were more hit or miss for me. I'll go more into detail later, but I did think that Hannah John Common got some good moments in that storyline. And, you know, I was happy to see everybody getting some, even Lucy got some smoochies. But like you're saying, boo for that ending scene with Davin and Sabine. That was tremendously upsetting, for one. And for two, I really hope that's not the last we see of Sabine.
I know. Because that scene went on for a while.
So long. I was so uncomfortable.
Me too. It's like, they are getting really naked. And then things got awful. And I'm like, no.
Though it stretched my limits of believability that the last piece of clothing to come off seemed to be Davin's shirt. I'm like, come on. Clearly that would have come off first.
I was thinking at some point, I'm like, I think this is the first time that Davin's been the most dressed person in a scene. Like, this feels weird.
Right?
And like, wow, his pants came off before his shirt.
I know.
Amazing.
But he seemed to be more determined to keep it on in this episode. What with the scene earlier with the guidoids trying to undress him, and he was just like, no.
Stop talking. Be naked.
I was watching this episode with my partner, and after the guidoid said that, she turned and looked at me and said, I'm going to try that next time.
It's just going to be met with laughter from now on, because it's going to make you think of this episode.
It will. But I guess, do we want to go ahead and just talk about that scene with Davin and Sabine? The reason I'm really concerned about it is that Sabine so far has been just such a love interest. She's been the cute blonde girl. We've gotten pretty much no backstory on her so far. And if they're going to kill her, she's being fridged to further Davin's storyline. And I don't want that to happen.
Right. Earlier I was talking about genre tropes, and this was sort of that, this is not the kind of genre trope I want. Because this kind of thing happens all the time, and it drives me crazy. Where you get, you know, the introduction of a new character, and as you said, so clearly they're for the purpose of being the love interest. Which is fine, to some extent. But not if you're gonna do that! Come on!
Not if that's the only reason they exist.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just to, like, consummate the love interest thing, and then immediately kill her. I hope they're not killing her.
Yeah. To repeat ourselves that we have said many times on many podcasts, we did not see her die, so she's not dead until we see a body. But that was still tremendously upsetting. And
it really was.
I was not a fan. I was not a fan.
It's like, this is not an image I want in my head.
No. The lighting was beautiful in that scene before that point. Even at that point, the lighting still looked great. But it was tremendously upsetting.
The sexy scenes had really good lighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even though they were mostly in an indoor space this episode, I felt like I was seeing different colors of lighting than we have been seeing. There was like some really intense orangey red lighting that they were using in those scenes with Dutch and Romwell. So this episode felt a bit more colorful to me than some previous ones have.
Agreed. Yeah, the asteroid ship was very rust-colored, which is a nice departure from like the grays and the blues and the, the washed-out thing that has been going on a lot earlier this season.
Right.
Which is very sci-fi standard these days and drives me crazy for that reason.
But I thought we got a nice mix-up of color and lighting, and it was a very pretty episode, I thought.
Mm-hmm. But, like, the candlelight at the Scarback Monastery was, it was gorgeous.
It really was. And we got some Dutch and Hunky Monk sexy time! Woo!
I kid you not, Romo had that line to Dutch. And I kid you not, my thought immediately was like, and cue the sex music.
Yeah. Well, in this episode we saw, because we've talked about previously that we'd seen some residual kind of jealousy and hanging on of Dutch by Davin, but it seemed like, especially in the last episode, Dutch was being a little more okay with Davin maybe pursuing a new love interest in Sabine. In this episode, we have that great conversation with her and Pri. What is the word that he uses to describe her what she's doing?
I don't know.
Don't you remember? He has that whole thing about how we need a word for when you want them, but you're not going to have them.
Oh, was it the dwant?
Yes, dwant. You're dwanting. It's okay to dwant him. Yes. So she has that great scene with Pri where he noticed that she's, maybe having a little bit of conflict over Davin finding a new love interest in Sabine, but we see her ultimately kind of letting him go and encouraging to go after him, and she found some happiness
after her.
With thank you. Well, whatever. I'm bad with pronouns. I'm sorry. Davin to go after her, meaning Sabine, and Dutch goes in and has finds some happiness when she can with Hunky Monk.
And then we also got the scene with Johnny and Potter.
Yes. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say more.
I just, if we're recounting the sexy scenes, the sexy times, and me mentally saying, and cue the sex music, that was instance 3 of cue the sex music.
They remain cute. I'm still rooting for the two of them. I think they're pretty cute together.
Yeah. I also thought it was cute that Lucy, enabled it.
Yeah. Again, with not dwelling on the jealousy. They showed Lucy being, helpful when it came to having Johnny and Potter hook up rather than being, I don't know, resentful about it.
Maybe it's good that Lucy once in physical form got to resolve some of that sexual tension with Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what prompted it.
Maybe.
I don't know.
But I did like that moment where Johnny realized that she wasn't a hologram. I think we all suspected that was the case when she was there.
Right.
But it was cute when he was like, oh, whoa.
Which, given the events of the episode, I get Johnny being a little jumpy about grabby technology.
Yes, exactly. And I thought the moment earlier in the episode when Potter was teasing him by taking off her robe just as she turned off the holophone was cute too.
And very in character, yes.
Yes.
I totally believe that that's exactly what Potter would do.
Mm-hmm. But like you were saying, it was great to see Lucy finally take shape and have form besides her lovely ship form. Not that there's anything wrong with her lovely ship form.
Totally not, but hard to make out with a ship.
Yes. And I think, so many people have been rooting for Tamsin McDonough to have a role where she actually gets to appear in the flesh on screen. And she finally got one. Yay!
I think there was no other fan input that I saw more often during the hiatus than Tamsin should be on the show and Lucy should have physical form. I saw that so many times. And so, yeah, again, like fan wish fulfillment, and it was great.
And it was a lot of fun to have her there in human form and to enjoy like shooting guns. And yeah, I thought she was a great addition to the Johnny Davin dynamic duo. I thought she made a good sidekick to them.
And sort of mocking them for not being able to keep up.
Yes. We're tired. We're not machines.
It's like, well, it's a really short trip if we cut through this wall. Oh, Lucy.
It took me a minute to realize that actually was Tamsin McDonough, because I think they reasonably so had her in a wig, which is not very similar to her usual hair. But so it took me a minute to realize, like, oh yeah, that is her face.
Yeah. There was that moment of like, I'm pretty sure that's her. And then, yeah. Once there was finally the close-up, you're like, oh yeah, there she is.
I should have guessed from her delivery of the "stop talking, be naked" line, because that was a very classic Tamsin McDonough delivery.
It was good. But yeah, it is nice to see her, like actually see her on the show.
And I want to thank Johnny for bringing the term gynoid into the conversation. Technically, they're gynoids, but nobody calls them that. Thank you, Johnny. I love you.
It's
and your
true.
geeky little trivia. I love you.
There was lots of nerdery going around this episode, which just generally made me happy.
There was so much nerdery. He got so excited about an asteroid ship.
He got so excited that he snorted. I don't know if you caught it, but
I didn't.
I'm 90% certain that he snorted. From excitement.
And I love that moment later on when he was trying to tell Dutch to be patient with Romwell because he just lost an asteroid ship. Dutch was just like, ugh.
I would also like to point out that Johnny was not the only nerd of the episode, because Davin was like, I'm a wizard.
I saw some really great little fan art that people made pairing that with scenes from Harry Potter. Like, you're a wizard, Davin. And
You'll have to send it to me because I'm curious now.
it was super cute.
I'm sure it was.
And it really made me happy to that scene that he had with Dutch at the end after he used his super goo powers to...
Oh, the pew 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 pew.
Yes. Yeah. And I loved that he told her, like, you know, this made him feel the best he had ever since whatever happened to him in the military. It's like, oh, Davin, I
know.
give you a big hug.
Those are the moments I love Davin best.
Mm-hmm.
Where, yeah, he's just sort of very open and honest about stuff and, you know, excited. And I just, yeah. Oh, hugs, Davin.
And admitting with his grown-up words that he feels good about things, you know, and not just being broody or whatever, you know, being really adult about his emotions. Yay.
And again, I think that's what separates Davin from the standard version of that character.
Yeah.
Which is why I like Davin more than...
the slab beef chest character, as my partner tends to call them.
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So yeah. Because he has feelings and expresses them in usually fairly healthy ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember if there's anything else about Davin that we want to talk about.
Yeah, it's tough because I really enjoyed that storyline, but it was just fun and fluffy. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion fodder, as much discussion fodder, I guess, but I did really like it.
Mm-hmm. Because the episode starts off where they're finally telling Dutch about Davin's goo powers. And there's that weird scene with the mind meld.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to make of that.
I'm not entirely sure either. His reaction was pretty good, though. I'm going to vomit with all of my mouth.
Well, he had teeth in his stomach, Stephanie.
Yeah, that must have been disturbing.
I'm disturbed, and it didn't happen to me.
Mm. Though I like Dutch was pretty... I was kind of shaking my fist at the screen when he poured all of the green goo that they had managed to get over that chunk of the power crystal stuff. I was like, really? All of it, Davin? You couldn't have saved some of it? So I was happy when Romwell later gave Dutch another copy of the goo. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Because Davin, oh my gosh, not all of it. Save some.
Yeah, you wouldn't think you'd need all of it, because, anyway, who knows, though?
It's fine.
They fixed it, it's fine. But, yeah, going back to the mind meld, I suppose we really should have seen this coming, though, right? Because that was something that Klein could do. Klein was able to mind meld with Davin. So it makes sense that Davin could mind meld with Mossy?
Oh, yeah. I feel like it makes sense that Davin could mind meld, or maybe potentially, probably Davin, though. He seems to have the most facility with the green goo, that he could mind meld with pretty much anybody once he got the hang of it.
Well, but I think they said something about the reason it was only with Mossy was because the goo was from Mossy. So...
Right. But if they got some other green goo,
yeah,
I bet he could figure out a way to harness its abilities.
Right. That's another thing. We got backstory on the green goo, including some exploration of this idea of the mind melding and the fact that it's the sap of life and all this sort of thing.
Yeah, my main takeaway from this episode was, Chris is so smart. She's just right about things.
It's more like, oh, that might be a clue.
Because in that scene between Dutch and shirtless Hunky Monk, woohoo, after the sexy times, he was talking about...
In the beautiful candlelight, which makes Hannah John Common look really good.
But he repeated your theory that you mentioned several episodes ago, this idea that perhaps the cutting that the Scarbacks do is a result of wanting to prove that they weren't infected by the green goo, that they could bleed, that they did scar. And yeah, you're just so smart, Chris.
Thank you. I will accept this praise.
And through Romwell, we also got some more information about something we were speculating earlier about the idea of the nanites that we saw back in A Glitch in the System, and if they had a similar effect to the green goo. And yeah, they do.
Indeed. Because Romwell, it turns out, is 423 years old.
And looking pretty good.
Yeah. And there was the whole story. He was talking about how people somehow involved with the green goo, apparently not level 6 Killjoys, because I think they predated that. So whatever preceded that. So maybe the Black Rock? I don't know.
You mean the Black Root?
Black Root, yes. I don't know why I said Black Rock. But yeah, so
there were a lot of rocks in this episode. It's okay.
So yes, the Black Root, or whoever, I'm guessing, I don't know that, but that's what I'm guessing, came to his homeworld, he said, and tortured him for information, and then, yeah. After that was the nanite thing. So this was like 400 years ago. Because we'd gotten the information before about how there hadn't been Scarbacks on Arkyn for 200 years. So we were like, this goes back 200 years? What? And no, it goes back 400 years, apparently.
And I was a little confused. We got several big information dumps in this episode, which aren't my favorite things. Those are the parts of the episode that I was kind of like, ugh, not so much. But from his backstory, Romwell's backstory, they're suggesting that the presence of the green goo in the quad is suggesting that whatever people, enemies, took over his planet are now in the quad and trying to take over here? Is that the suggestion we're supposed to come away with?
Well, I don't know if it's... I don't know. Maybe. I'm just curious, though, because there was the evidence of the Scarbacks on Arkyn from 200 years ago. And they had the saplings, and there was the green goo there. So, I don't know. I don't know if this is like a recent development, is what I'm saying. But I am curious if maybe they'd been there for a while, but are planning to stage something, which would explain possibly why
they're putting up the wall, or the plans for the walls in Westerly and things like that?
Well, the walls, and also Potter's mom had developed that thing to protect Kresh from its enemies or something, to protect it from other people taking the planet. maybe that's who she's trying to guard the planet against.
Oh, that's a good idea. You're probably right. I'm just going to say you're right, Chris. I'm going to get on board early. That would be a good idea, though, since we were confused by the idea of, like, why would you kill off your entire planet? That makes no sense. So I like that idea.
It could make sense if whatever you're facing is worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, there was the whole thing. Romwell was talking about how his family was royalty. His father was a lord, and so that's the reason he was taken and tortured for information.
Right.
So it could be. I don't know.
So let's talk about the other big information dump that we got in this episode, which was Dutch basically giving Romwell her backstory, most of which was pretty much told to us already in bits and pieces throughout season 1, I feel like. There was much of that story that I thought, okay, yeah. But what did you think about that whole sequence with the instrument and the, dream sequence-like episodes?
Yeah, I mean, as you just said, a lot of it was sort of a rehash of stuff we got sprinkled throughout season 1, which I don't necessarily mind just because, like, I'm aware that it's a TV show and people have not watched it in a while and maybe have forgotten and need to be reminded. And then we did get the added information, though, and sort of a new glimpse of Dutch's new perspective on Klein. Because she said before that she didn't really hate him anymore.
Right.
And I feel like this is sort of her explicitly stating her new perspective on what Klein had done. Because Klein basically, granted in sort of the worst way possible, but Klein did make her a survivor. That's sort of the lasting impact is, you can't really take down Dutch because she will kill you if she has to protect herself and the people she cares about. So, that's sort of like the big takeaway, which, as you said, isn't really new information, but it's stated explicitly, I guess, is sort of the big thing.
I wish that they had maybe found a different way to more visually communicate the backstory that she was laying down for Romwell. I thought the little flash forward, flashback, not real fantasy type. I don't know exactly what they were, but where it was Romwell sort of seeing himself with Dutch and them growing old together. That struck me as a little cheesy. It felt like they really shoehorned in an opportunity to get Hannah John Common to sing. I feel like that could have been done a little more elegantly.
See, again, this is where my whole fan-fiction-y kind of thing came in. I was like, I don't know that we need to see this, but...
Yeah, it felt like the fan fiction element of Lucy taking gynoid form, I thought that worked pretty well. The fan fiction element of, like, Dutch singing, and that didn't work quite as well for me. But I feel like maybe they could have communicated more of that in visual storytelling rather than just having Dutch be narrating. But I did think we were going to get more flashbacks than we actually got. Yeah, that is I know I'm on record for not loving flashbacks, but that would be a good occasion to use flashbacks, is to show us information we don't already have so that we can see Dutch reacting in the moment. I think that would have been a good occasion to use some flashbacks. Right,
or even a new perspective on something that we'd already heard before. Just because we heard it but didn't see it for ourselves. Because sometimes that's kind of illuminating. I like it when they do that.
Mm-hmm. So the little images that Romwell sees of them growing old together, it struck me as a little bit cheesy. But that whole sequence ended in a really surprising way for me. A very dark, unexpected way for me. Which I'm trying to decide if it balances out the preceding cheese factor. I think it does.
I don't know that I'd go with cheesy, but I found it confusing.
Okay, yeah, it was confusing.
Where is this gonna go? Like, I don't think I like where this is going. And then it ended in an interesting way. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll accept it. Mm-hmm. Because it ended with her trying to kill him. And it's like, reveal... oh, she's manipulating him, I think. Okay.
And we saw her finally playing that instrument earlier in the season. And because of that, I think that set us up for not expecting the whole, the strings are poisoned with a paralytic. that came as a surprise.
That she's immune to.
Because she spent many years developing an immunity to iocane powder. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong thing.
Good job. Good
Thank
job
you.
throwing that in there. I also always think of that scene whenever immunity to poisons is brought up.
So yeah, I totally did not see that moment coming when suddenly he's paralyzed and then she garrots him with one of the wires. Because that is, Dutch from the beginning has been, I do not kill people unless it's in self-defense. And while I think this could maybe fall into a category of self-defense for her, I think it more just showed her line, her trigger is if you're trying to imprison people, no, that does not fly with me. I need my autonomy. I need my freedom. And if you're going to interfere with that, down with you.
Yeah, that's like the all bets are off kind of line.
Exactly.
Don't mess with Dutch or her people.
Yeah. And I liked that when she did tell Davin and Johnny that she had killed Romwell, they had that unspoken reaction where they just looked at each other with clear surprise, like, oh my gosh, she actually killed that guy. So it felt like they did make enough of that moment where she thought she killed him. But then part of me kind of like, is it cheating that then he wasn't dead? I don't know. That they were able to take our lead character to that dark of a place, but then ultimately have it not have the type of effect it might have otherwise had because he was infused with nanites, etc.
Well, but they did actually talk about that, though. Like, they expressed it during the fight, because, she was talking about how he said something like, you killed me, and she's like, it didn't take, and he's like, you didn't know that when you did it.
Right.
So, I mean, it was
addressed.
It was acknowledged.
But I thought that moment where she at least thought she killed Romwell really resonated with what has been going on for Dutch throughout the series, but throughout this season in particular, with her fighting this idea of like, am I a good person? Am I a bad person? Can I come back from what Klein did to me? So I really did like that moment. But again, the stuff that led up to it was less effective for me. So I kind of have mixed feelings about that little story thread.
I think that's fair. Because, yeah, it's one of those things, like, I'm not surprised she killed him. Like, I'm maybe a little bit surprised, but at the same time, as we've said, like, we've kind of always known that that's Dutch's big do not cross kind of line, It's a little jarring to see it. I mean, certainly.
I think because of how she killed him, it was as impactful.
Yes.
Because he was defenseless. She did it so hands-on. It's not the same as if she had just shot him from across the room.
Yep.
So that moment was pretty powerful for me, I gotta say.
Do we think that we will see Romwell again? I mean, I kept thinking that they were maybe leading to it, but then they ended the episode with Dutch handing over information from Bellish about getting him out of the quad, so...
Right. Yeah, I was surprised that they seemed to wrap up his role in the storyline as neatly as they did at the end of this episode. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him again. Honestly, I thought he would be more of a sticking around for a little bit presence.
Mm-hmm. Well, because for a while there, it felt like they were maybe building him up to being a foil or a love interest or something for Dutch.
Right.
I still wouldn't be surprised if he shows up again in that capacity. But that's not remotely how the episode ended, which, I'm good with. I'm good with the way the episode ended, but that part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, qualifiers.
And it felt like Dutch, much like Davin, got kind of a little boost of confidence or good feeling about themselves when Romwell has that really nice moment with her where he says that Dutch doesn't remind him of anybody that he's ever met before.
Which was such a good line, again, following through from stuff earlier this season, where Dutch is just so thrown by all the double Dutch stuff that they talk about. And, there's the shadow Dutch, the mirror Dutch, that's it, the mirror Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
The creepy Peter Pan shadow situation. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not as relieved as Dutch, but I think we were both pretty relieved. But I have so many questions still.
About?
200 years ago. Who was that?
Well, I think that is still to be revealed with the decrypting of the message that Klein sends. I think that's still an element that they're going to return to, of course.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm really getting at is I'm impatient.
Yeah. Yeah. So that comment you just made, it reminded me of some feedback that we got from somebody. And here is where I owe people a really big apology because, okay, so if you go to our website, ashgenretv.com/feedback, there's a little screen there with all of the ways to contact us, including our email, and then a little contact form that you can, fill out to send us feedback that way. I think, and I still do think by looking at how I set up that contact form, it should have been sending us emails with the comments you've been putting in there. But no, that is not what has been happening.
Is this why we haven't been getting any feedback?
Part of it, yes. So I realized...
Not that we haven't gotten any. We've gotten very little, is I should say.
I realized yesterday that there's a section of our website called feedback where those messages that people are sending through that feedback form, that contact form, have been ending up, but I had no idea. So I really apologize if you've sent us like a bunch of messages and you think, why have they never read anything that I've sent in? This is why. I'm an idiot and I didn't realize that there was a section of our website where that feedback was being sent. So I really, really apologize. But I did want to mention this feedback that we got from Rachel. She said it after last week's episode, but I think it's kind of pertinent to what you just said. Rachel said, writing to echo what I think Chris has been saying, I enjoyed the episode, but it was very plot-driven. Potter's mother had to infect herself because, well, to let Potter ascend to the 9. This season is good, but I think I enjoyed last season more because it was less clear that the case of the week was playing into the bigger story. At the end, there was this catharsis and great fun in the going back and discovering the puzzle pieces after seeing the full puzzle. And I think that is a fair comment on how season 1 and season 2 are differing because, we have in season 1 where we got to the end and we thought, oh, this is why they showed us all this stuff to begin with. Whereas with this season, they set up far more of these big plot lines in episode 1 and they've been like doling out little pieces of it throughout the season. So I think I, like Rachel, kind of preferred the way it happened in season 1, but I saw a lot of critique from people during season 1 that they felt like they didn't think things were adding up to something bigger, so that might be why they're trying this different storytelling method in season 2.
I think part of it, too, though, is because they did that in season 1, I mean, the fact that it led into the bigger plot, starting season 2, now you have that bigger plot.
This is true. We saw the green goo.
You literally can't do that again with season 2. You might be able to start over again next season, let's say, but yeah, the way season 1 ended, I can't conceive of how they would replicate that storytelling pattern this season.
I think at the very least we'd have these questions of the green goo and level 6, etc., because of what we saw at the end of season 1. So I don't think that they could have been as clean of a slate at the beginning of this season. So yeah, I take your point.
But yeah, I mean, I also appreciated the way they built it up in season 1. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you do that this season. Also, the fact that because we know they did that last season, I feel like we're all looking for how they're going to do that this season. Because you're aware of it now.
Though I do think, like you were saying, it does have the effect of making you a bit impatient because we can see very clearly, oh, we're going to know more about the green goo. We're going to know more about this double Dutch figure. And we're eager to get more of the details.
Tell me more. What are you doing, Potter's mom? Whose name I never remember, apparently.
Adeline?
I think you're right.
Okay.
You're right. But see, if I said that, though, nobody would know who I was talking about anyway.
I think that's true.
We just have to go back to Potter's mom. I'm just going to call her Potter's mom.
Speaking of Potter's mom, Rachel also made a comment that Potter's mother infected herself and that didn't seem to have much of a consequence. And I actually thought that myself too the first time I watched it, but I realized on rewatch what they said resulted of her doing that and generating that data was that it allowed Potter to recognize that the pathogen she created was similar to this other one that she had treated before. And that's how she knew that the one big weakness it would have would be intense heat. But at the same time, it was a cold disease. It was making things cold. So the idea that they needed to apply a lot of heat, not exactly a huge leap of a huge leap to go from A to B. But they did try to demonstrate that there was information that they gleaned from Potter's mother infecting herself.
But it's better to know that than to
just blow things up willy-nilly.
To blow things up and then make everything worse, possibly. I'm just saying.
So thank you, Rachel, for sending in that feedback. And again, a big apology for me for not realizing that we weren't getting feedback emailed to us. Sorry, my bad. I will from now on be checking the feedback section of our website. So sorry.
I just have to give a shout out to whoever came up with Dutch saying manic pixie assassin.
That was a great line. That was a really great line.
It was so great. I love it.
And speaking of great lines, I also really liked her comment to Pri that I sense a reluctance, yet a desire to be the center of attention.
And also, Lucy, are you making sparks? Aren't I supposed to?
That was, I felt like that was maybe not necessarily a callback, but it reminded me of what they did in the premiere with all of the sparks flying around Dutch and Davin as they kissed, and that was our big clue that it was a dream. But yeah, I loved that moment too, where, she pulls back and she's got sparks coming out of her little gynoid finger.
It was pretty great. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode of Killjoys. You can send them to killjoys@askgenretv.com. We love getting voice messages, which you can send us in a couple of ways. You can record a voice memo on your smartphone and email it to us, or call our listener voicemail line at 972-514-7223. You can follow us on Twitter or Tumblr at Killjoys Podcast. We often live tweet during both the East and West Coast airings of Killjoys in the US and Canada.
The Quad is part of the Ask Genre TV family of podcasts. To find our other podcasts about Orphan Black and Lost Girl and other shows, visit our website, askgenretv.com.
Thanks for listening. See you in the Quad.